Story 1. The cast. Op. Me 6'2 inches, and at the time about 320 pounds before equipment. This will become clearer. Friend. 5'11 inches, probably about 250 pounds, and with plenty of ink, like full sleeves up both arms and plenty of other work on the calves and shins. The Karen. Late 40s, looks 50s, career drinker, chain smoker, probably onto her second or third baby daddy, what we used to refer to in the trade as God help us for middle-aged women who think they know their rights, has already been drinking that afternoon. PS and DS police officers. Location: local independent coffee cafe, seats about 100. Given the area lends itself towards students, young mothers and hipsters, has a very Art Deco type feel to the place. The tale. It's midsummer, I think 2004, maybe 05, and we're in the middle of a minor heat wave, lots of taps af, as the locals might say. I swung past the cafe to meet my friend as he's finishing up work 16 o'clock or so we can head back to his place, chill out, catch up and such. I've arrived a little early, so I've ordered a bagel and cold drink while I wait. Now I'm sitting essentially in a corner seat kind of behind the front door, basically obscured, and just idly listening to whatever was on the radio, not really thinking about anything in particular. I'm about halfway through my bagel when I start to hear raised voices, not actually shouting yet, but leaning towards it. Out of curiosity, if nothing else, I stick my head up and try to clock what's going on. Across the other side of the cafe I can see my friend, and the Karen having some verbal, she's the one increasing in volume. I watch for a minute or two trying to get a handle on what the fuss is about, but otherwise quite content to watch a bit of a floor show. Hey, it's not my cafe, and my friend has plenty of experience dealing with this sort of crap. I digress. I tune out the music and focus in on the conversation argument, and as best I can recall it runs thus. The Karen, it's just not good enough. This quality of service is atrocious. Friend, I believe you'll find our regular customers disagree. Karen cuts him off. Regular. I'm a regular, I'll have you know, young man. I come in here all the time. Friend, I've never seen you before, miss. The Karen, well, I've never seen you here before either, and the service I've had today is awful. I don't know why anyone would come here when it's like this. Friend, the service you've had has been the same as anyone else would get. You can't have a free bottle. Me internally free bottle? Huh? The Karen, well, I can see them on other tables. Why isn't there one on mine? Friend, anyone who has a bottle has paid for it. If you would like one, the counter staff will be happy to oblige. The Karen, oh, so now you're telling me you don't do table service. What sort of place is this? I want your manager, damn it. You're a terrible servant. Yes, she said servant. I'm assuming she meant waiter. Maybe not though. I can tell from my friend's expression he's starting to get to somewhere between angry and amused. Friend, I'm not your servant, miss, and no, we don't take orders at the tables. We will, however, bring your orders to the table once prepared. Now please, if you want a bottle, go to the counter. Friend starts to turn away to get on with something else. The Karen, excuse me. How dare you turn your back on me? The dare came out at a pitch that could rattle glass. The Karen, get me your manager right now. I'll have you out of your job and on the street, young man. Friend with proverbial big grin. Miss, I am the manager. I should note that some of the other customers who are now fully tuned into this little show, and who assuredly are regulars as I recognize a few faces, start to chuckle. They all know my friend is the manager, as he's a well-liked sort, far more likable than I am, if truth be told. The Karen does one of those little dismissive head tuts and says, with tattoos like that? Nonsense. You liar, no one would make you manager. You look like a thug. I want your boss. Get him, or give me his phone number right now. Friend? Oh, to hell with it. Miss, you're now just being annoying, and I have no further interest in you being in my establishment. Please collect your things and leave. The Karen, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to have you fired. You can't kick me out, you jerk. This goes back and forth for a few minutes. She's refusing to leave, getting more worked up, and my friend is trying as diplomatically as possible to talk her down and get her out. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the place tends to get a share of young mothers. One of them is sitting down at my end and has been watching the situation with the same sort of expression as myself, I think. But her kid, not sure on age, maybe 18 months-ish, has been woken up by the shouting and gets a bit worked up, you know, that kind of gasping sound that happens just before they start to scream. Yup. Friend looks over towards the mother and baby. The mother is trying to soothe the baby as best as she can. The Karen just keeps shouting. At this point, the shouting has become a bit incoherent. Friend looks at me and has the look of, I'm done with this, turns back to the Karen and totally deadpan. Listen, lady, if you don't leave right now, force will be used to evict you from the premises. Your shouting is disturbing the regulars, and I don't want you in my establishment. The Karen, you can't force me to go anywhere. This is public. I'm not going until I speak to your boss. Friend looks over at me again and just nods, points at the Karen, and points to the door. I stand up. Now, as I stated at the start, I'm a big guy, ex-services, and I was at the time working for Gov Security on secondment with county police. To be clear though, I'm wholly a civilian at this point. I've been at work during the day, and I've gone to meet my mates still with some work kit on me, which in this case includes some comms kit, a tactical vest with plates, cuffs, and other odds and ends. People dressed like me isn't a common sight in our city, so it stands out. I start walking over to the Karen, who's totally oblivious, and I catch the eye of a few of the regulars who are smiling with a fair expectation of what's going to happen next. I step up to the Karen, and with a voice raised enough, I say, "Miss, can I have your attention, please?" The Karen turns, and there's this almost comedic moment as she's eyes level with my chest, and she has to tilt her head back to look at my face. I've got a shaved head, goatee beard, and she clams up silent as her brain plays catch-up. Me, the manager here, has asked you repeatedly to leave the premises, and your volume has disturbed a minor and no doubt the other patrons. As the manager has stated his position, you need to leave. Now, please collect your things and get out. The Karen, what is this? Who are you? I fold out my ID that's tucked into the tactical. Right now I'm just a concerned citizen who has been asked by the manager to help you leave the premises. Now pick up your bag and start walking. The Karen, you can't make me go anywhere. I don't care who you think you are. I haven't spoken to the real manager yet. I'm not going. Me, miss. On my oath, I promise you, he really is the manager. Now I will ask you one last time to leave voluntarily. If you refuse to do so, I will use force and you will be ejected. The Karen, you lay your hands on me, mister. I'll have you charged for assault. You can't touch a lady. Me, you are refusing wholly to leave then, are you? The Karen, what did I just say? Are you stupid? One body rotation later, her left arm reversed, bent at the elbow with the back of the hand towards the back of her neck. My arm hooked under the armpit and pressure applied to force her over at the waist. I grab her bag with my free arm and start walking her towards the door. My friend at this point is 2 steps ahead of me, gets the door open, and I get her out onto the pavement. Quickly I disengage, releasing her unharmed, place her bag on the pavement in front of her, and step back into the doorway. The Karen shakes her arm a bit, has a moment of being almost bewildered, looks at me and just snaps. Jumps straight at me and starts striking my face. The first 2 strikes totally caught me off guard, and now I'm trying to get her back under control. It takes a few minutes as I find out firsthand that her nails are really sharp. Now I've got her on the floor. I'm keeping my torso and face away from her with my leg essentially pinning her against the exterior wall of the cafe and having a moment to myself of, well heck, this wasn't what I'd planned for the afternoon. She's now screaming blue murder, and as I said earlier, it's a really hot day, and there's plenty of people milling around, and it's getting an audience. Me, if I let you up, are you going to leave now? The Karen is trying to get free and clawing at my leg. Not with much success though. Heavy-duty blacks are taking the sting out of her nails. The Karen, screw you. You've assaulted me now. Police. Someone call the police. She starts punching my shin. Me internally, oh screw that. Me. You know what? Sure, let's get the police. I'm sure the manager would love to discuss this situation with them. I grab my comms, put a call through to the station that's about a mile away, and ask how quickly I can get a uniformed assist. Callback says 5 minutes. Fine, I can wait. I leave the comms channel open so the incoming officers can hear everything. Miss, there's police coming. I'm going to let you up if you want to leave, and we can all go on with our day in peace. The Karen is still trying to get free by hitting my calf and shin. I've eased up the pressure so she's not going anywhere, but certainly not causing any pain either. Hell, she could probably actually get up, but she's not particularly cogent at this point. The Karen, I know people, I've got friends, my husband will have you. Reallyite. Friend's voice from behind, you good? Yeah, got uniforms coming, everything okay in there? Friend? Yeah, the baby is just noising up. Cool. I can just hear a siren pulsing a bit in the near distance, trying to clear through junctions. The Karen, that's the police coming for you. You're going to jail, jerk. Mercifully, the car pulls up at this point. The passenger side PS uniform gets out first, looks at me and blanches a little, then goes to the Karen and starts to cuff her. Driver side DS uniform gets out and comes round. I know the driver side one on a first name basis. Man, doesn't that hurt? Me looking down at my leg, eh? Nah, not really. She's not hitting that hard. DS? No. Your face? What about my face? PS has got the Karen cuffed at this point and gets her into the back of the car nice and quick. DS turns me around so I can see my reflection in the cafe window. And at the same time I realize my face hurts so much. Turns out the first strike she got earlier had gouged 4 solid strips into my left cheek, maybe a half-inch below the eye, and it's bleeding fairly keenly down my chin. I'd honestly not noticed it due to a bit of adrenaline. Friend comes out of the cafe to meet the police and clocks my face. Dude, that looks very sore. Slight grin, you betcha. DS, so, charges? The Karen took a deal without going to court, the latest in an adult career of previously relatively petty infractions, 18 months for assault. I got 4 mild scars that only really stand out if I get a bit of a tan. The punchline. What had started all this in the first place? Well, the cafe was supplying jugs of iced still water at every table due to the heat. They had liter bottles of fizzy water in a chiller for a price for people who wanted that instead. The Karen had seen them on other tables and just assumed they were free, so had kicked off over the fact that her table didn't have one. Story 2. Now the names are changed for privacy reasons, so let's begin. Jerk friends now ex-Ann. Friend boss old boss James my brother pops my dad. So a little backstory, I've known Ann for a long time, 6th grade to now. We've been friends for most of the time, and we are those friends who tend to flirt with each other for fun, but it never goes past that, but boy do I wish some days. Now we lost contact when I moved my sophomore year of high school. A few months ago, I bumped into her in the local big box store. We talked for a bit, and we swapped numbers so we could hang out. A few days later, I find out she's dating this guy who I'll call Jerk because he's a freaking jerk, plain and simple. So the Jerk and my brother would be together since they used to be friends. Jerk starts telling my brother how he's sleeping with this girl, and he's basically using her for a place to stay for a few days until he gets his own place. While he decided to show my brother some risque pictures he took of her. My brother knew who it was right away and had Jerk forward him the pics, to which he did. My brother sent me the pics, and I turned around and called Ann and told her to come over for a bit. We needed to talk. It was important. About 45 minutes later, Ann gets to my house. She sees me looking pissed and asks what happened. I showed her the pics and told her Jerk works with my brother, and he sent them to him while bragging that he was using you for a place to live. Quick side note, Ann is a spitfire when you cross her. So she gets pissed and calls Jerk and roasts him out for 45 minutes. Jerk fails to realize that the store he works at has super high-def cameras facing the counters because it's been robbed 8-9 times. So I call the boss, she's still the boss there. I just don't work there anymore, and tell her Jerk is showing pictures that are NSFW to employees and possibly customers as well. Boss pulls the camera footage from the time in question and can clearly see said pictures on his phone along with more inappropriate stuff he does during his shifts. So he gets a 3-week suspension and has a massive write-up. He's now got 1 foot out the door and about to be 2. The state has also been investigating the $300 plus in missing scratch tickets. So they came down on him as well for unlawful distribution of porn. Now for the revenge part of this. Anne told him they were done after a few days of her thinking of what to do about him. He didn't take too kindly to that and started threatening her. My dad is the owner of a local transport business. They do cabs, limos, etc. While I call him and tell him that Jerk is going after Anne. Now most of the employees at the station have met Anne, and they all love her, and Dad planned on offering her a job anyhow. Well, Jerk called to get a cab to Anne's apartment like he did every weekend. While I took the cab and got Jerk and told him we had to swing by the station because I left my phone there. We pull up and I walk in and tell Anne he's in the cab. Dad comes out from the back and sees him in the cab. He goes to his computer and uses the remote for the cab and shuts it down. So I went to tell him the cab had a malfunction and he needs to wait inside for a few minutes while we fix it. Jerk goes inside, sees Anne sitting at my desk with a dozen roses there and a card that says "Love you." I bought them for my grandma because she was almost back from a 1.5-month trip to South America. Jerk flipped out and lunged at Anne. Big mistake, as Dad is about 6'6", 315 pounds of muscle. Jerk grabbed Anne by the neck, and before he knew what happened, Dad had him on the floor and pinned him. The other driver, who we call the Godfather because he has the Bronx accent, picks Jerk up, pulls him outside and ties him to the pole by the building. Now this pole is right next to the sprinkler system for the lawn. I turned it on full blast and left Jerk there until the cops came to get him. Now 95% of the cops know my family, as this is a rather small town and we all get along great. The footage of him being tied to a pole mysteriously disappeared from the evidence lockers after that night. He was released on bond and had to go to court, so he called the cab company to get a ride to the courthouse because it's a thunderstorm and he didn't want to walk 8 miles. Big mistake. The driver drove extra carefully because the roads were flooded by 4 inches of rain and visibility was low due to fog. Jerk was 45 minutes late to his hearing and was held in contempt of court, plus got charged with assault, trespassing, and possession because he had some coke on him. The judge threw the book at him and gave him 10 years, but would reduce it to 5 if he told who his dealer was. Jerk tried to blame me, but it didn't go over well, so he came clean and got 5 years. And Jerk was put into the cell with a guy who is known for beating guys who abuse women and children. From what I heard from my buddy, who's a guard, Jerk spent the first 2 weeks of his 5 years in the hospital because he got the life kicked out of him. And he's the yard witch, meaning he gets the worst jobs, and anytime it's a 2-man job, he gets pinned on it by himself. Word travels fast, and poor Jerk found out just how bad it can be. Story 3. Just some clarification for this story: my dad is a bail bondsman. For those who do not know what that is, a bail bond agent, also known as a bail bondsman, works independently or as a representative of the agency. His role is to complete bonding paperwork with an accused person, receive payments, and track down the person if he fails to appear in court. No, he is not a bounty hunter, but that's okay if you thought that. We get that a lot. So one day after a hearty breakfast at IHOP, we were riding around town and we saw a lady walk out of the wooded area covered in mud and looked weak. We drive over, and to our surprise, it is Crackhead, who had cost my dad a lot of money in his business. She sees my dad and runs to a nearby empty mall parking lot. The mall is not that busy as it is 40-50 years old, and not many people go to it, and tries hiding behind a car. The next part is what I got from my dad. She reeked of body excreta and was very high. She had been hiding in the woods for 2 days. My dad's friend is a police officer, and he showed up. She tried to run, but my dad just grabbed her by her shoulders and detained on the ground. Enter entitled lady. She showed up and just about hit the officer. She and entitled lady 2 start screaming about how we need to stop abusing them and that they are recording it all. When my dad's friend starts to explain that he is a police officer, he was off duty but had his squad car. She starts calling him a liar and pulls out a taser. The officer and my dad draw their guns and she screams and jumps back into the car. The entire time, I am dying of laughter and entitled lady calls the cops, which is hilarious because my father's friend was radioed to go to. They all ended up going to jail for assaulting a police officer. Story 4. So, this happened to me a few years ago, and I just wanted to share it here, and it is a long one. Senior year of high school, I was taking a plane to visit my grandma. The flight went from Baltimore to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to Vegas, then Vegas to Boise. The flight from Baltimore was almost empty, and since I was on Southwest, I could choose my own seat. I was on the same plane until Vegas. I selected the last row of the plane by the window, put my earbuds in, and took a nap until Pittsburgh. When the plane landed, I went to the bathroom while people were getting onto the plane. To save my spot, I left my backpack in my seat, put my jacket on the seat, and left. When I got back, I noticed that a pregnant lady was sitting in my seat, with her husband in the aisle seat and my jacket thrown on the ground in the aisle with my backpack underneath, containing a laptop. Kind of annoyed, I pointed out that I was previously sitting in the window seat and wanted to know if I could have my seat back. "Can't you see that I am pregnant and need this seat?" she said aggressively. Then I looked at the husband and asked if he could please scoot over and sit next to his wife. This guy looked me in the eyes and said, "Sorry, but we are allowed to choose our own seats," and I chose the aisle seat. Being a high school senior, I wasn't that big of a guy, but I was still not happy to be sitting in the center seat. Realizing that this was a losing argument and I wasn't going to get any leverage over this lady, I decided to grit my teeth and bear it. I collected my stuff and moved into the middle seat. The second I sat down, the lady said, "You can't have your backpack in your seat. You're going to have to find a place to put it." "I'm just going to put it under my seat," I responded. "Where am I going to put my feet then?" she responded. "I don't know. Not under my seat," I replied. Growing up, I swore more than most people and really only watched what I said when at school. Suddenly, I felt someone grab my collar. The husband pulled me inches from his face and said, "Don't use that language to my wife or the baby. You will say you're sorry." I was shocked. Not only was this guy grabbing me in public, but at the time, I was only 17 and still considered a minor. Not wanting to make a deal out of this, I gave the most half-assed, "I'm sorry" to the woman and put my earbuds in as the flight was getting ready to take off. While taxiing, the lady kept trying to get my attention by yelling in my ear and snapping her fingers inches in front of my face, before she finally pulled my earbuds out. "You need to turn your electronic off during takeoff," she said. Now, my dad was a pilot for 30 years, and he confirmed that electronics don't interfere with communications. It is mostly a formality so that people pay attention to the emergency instructions. So I ignored her, since we are literally less than a minute from taking off. Enraged, she spammed the flight attendant button so that one would come. We also had to hold takeoff until this issue was solved. The flight attendant runs over and asks what is wrong, expecting an emergency. "He won't turn off his electronics before flight. He is trying to kill us," she exclaims. Realizing everyone is staring at us when the flight attendant asks me to turn it off, I oblige. After I turn it off, she starts to lecture me about how she was right and I was wrong, rubbing how the flight attendant proved her right. So the flight is in the air, and when the intercom tells me we can use electronics, I put my earbuds in and crank it. About 5 minutes into the flight, I felt aggravated tapping on my shoulder. I turn and look at the woman. "You need to turn that down. It is bad for the baby," she said. While I was listening to the music louder than normal, It still wasn't to the point that an unborn baby would be able to hear and understand. Shocked, I responded with no, but the second she reached for the flight attendant button, I said that I would. I did that trick where you turn your volume down 2 times and then up once so that it looks like you turned it down 3 times. Better? I asked. More, she responded, so I went down 1 more. And before I could put my earbuds in, she said, "It is proper etiquette to talk to people you're sitting next to." I just ignored her. I sat back and tried to close my eyes, and amazingly this worked. I fell asleep for about an hour. It was a 5-hour flight. When I woke up, this woman had her foot on my backpack with a laptop in it, so I adjusted my foot so that it would be uncomfortable for her to continue to keep her feet the way they were. She immediately stood up, and I thought she was going to yell given her ability to overreact. But it turns out she was just getting up to go to the bathroom. She gets past me and her husband when a brilliant idea pops into my head. The second she steps into the bathroom, I get ready to get up and move my stuff over to the window seat. As I grab my backpack and shift my momentum over, I feel a hand grab me. I did not take into account the husband. "You are not taking my wife's seat," he said. "Sir, I have to warn you that you are grabbing a minor, and if I feel like it at any second, I could cry that you are attacking me," I respond as he lets go, and I move over to the seat I had before. When she gets back, she is furious, demanding that I move seats now to the point that the flight attendant comes over to see what is going on, and this time she sides with me. When she asks her husband to make me move, I look him dead in the eyes, and he goes back to reading his book, and she sits in the middle seat, pissed as hell. Thankfully, I moved seats because she was up and down in her seat, having to go to the bathroom every 15 minutes, and that was pretty much the rest of the flight, except how she intercepted my bag of pretzels when the drink cart came. I responded by closing the shade to the window as we started to land at the Las Vegas airport. Once off the plane, I went to Burger King to get a drink and some food. Then I got to my next gate and found the last seat. I scarfed down my fries and burger, walk across the hall, literally 10 feet from my seat to throw away my garbage, and when I turn to go back to my seat, I see the same lady now sitting in the seat I had my bag in. She had moved it to the floor right in front of her. Then she shot me this smug grin thinking she had won, somewhat defeated by losing 2 seats to this lady, losing sleep and my patience. It was time for action. I walked over to her to gather my things, and as I got to her, I looked her dead in the eyes, raised my right hand out, fingers spread, and hovered it right over her stomach. Looked down at my hand, then back to her eyes. "I just cursed your baby," I say straight-faced, turn around 180, walk across the hall, and sit down on the floor staring at her intensely. Now I don't believe in curses, nor do I think I have the ability to place a curse, but this lady believed it. Her face was left expressionless, and she just started weeping to herself as I sat and watched. When her husband came over to see what was wrong, and she told him, he instantly stormed over to me and knocked the drink out of my hand, grabbed me by the collar, and got right in my face. "Listen here, you little jerk," he got out before security guards grabbed the man and detained him. "The FA doesn't mess around with who they hire." One guard asked me why this guy was angry, and I said that his wife had taken my seat, and I made a comment under my breath, and he got upset with it. The officer asked for my name and identification, and saw that I was a minor. He asked if I wanted to press charges, and I told him yes, but that I also didn't want to miss my flight. He understood and let me go, then informed the Southwest airline gate attendant to please keep track of me in case we needed more information. This meant that I got to get on early, and I chose the first seat I could, aisle seat, to see if this lady would get on the plane. Since she was sitting in the same gate as my flight, she never got on the plane, and it took off. Halfway through the flight attendant asked me if I put a curse on the baby, and I responded with, "I don't know magic." 20 minutes later, the flight attendant told me that they missed their flight and they would have to buy a new ticket to their final destination with another airline. With 5 words, I cost this horrible woman and her abusive husband around $500. Story 5. During my senior year of high school, I had already earned enough credits in my junior year to graduate. Thanks to an extra gym credit I got early through martial arts, which I also taught, I technically didn't need to attend my senior year. However, I decided to stay and graduate with my friends. To make the year worthwhile, I filled my schedule with classes I found interesting or thought would look good to colleges. I signed up for a few advanced placement app courses like United States Government, Physics, and Anatomy and Physiology, along with some random electives. The workload for the app classes was intense, and since I already had strong test scores from the previous year, I wasn't too concerned about the extra effort. So I dropped Physics, United States Government, and a Jewelry 2 class. This left me with 3 open periods a day surrounding lunch. It felt amazing I still had one app class to stay focused, but also had plenty of downtime. Since both my parents worked, no one initially realized anything was out of the ordinary. This was the 1990s, after all, and we discovered later that our answering machine was broken. Unbeknownst to us, the school had been calling 3 times a day to inform my parents that I wasn't attending a study hall I had been assigned to after dropping those classes. This hadn't been an issue in previous years, as free periods were usually unmonitored. What made the situation unusual was the attitude of the woman who made the calls. After the first few days, her messages started getting increasingly stern. Despite this, no one at the school spoke to me directly, nor was anything sent home in writing. Around this time, my mom had just started transitioning into retirement after working as a hairstylist. She alternated between working 1 week and taking the next off, so she began receiving these calls. When she spoke with a woman, my mom calmly explained that she was fine with the situation. My grades were good, I could have graduated the previous year, and my college applications were already submitted. To her, it wasn't a big deal. Unfortunately, this didn't sit well with the caller, who completely lost her composure. She lectured my mom about how irresponsible we were as a family, and even claimed she would personally ruin my college prospects. Her reaction was over the top, but she continued calling for every missed class, even after my parents repeatedly told the school it was unnecessary. Eventually, my parents went to the school in person to address the matter. It turned out the school was required by law to report any unapproved absences. My parents offered verbal confirmation that I was allowed to miss these periods, but the school insisted on a written statement. The caller even demanded my parents include language admitting they were neglectful and that my absences were detrimental to my education. Naturally, my mom refused to write anything of the sort. Instead, she came up with a clever plan. Knowing the school was legally obligated to notify her of every unexcused absence, she decided to make them work for it. Every time the woman called, my mom pretended to deliberate over whether to allow me to miss that particular period. She'd say something like, I'm not sure. Let me think about it. Okay, this one time is fine, but make sure to call me again if he misses anything else. This went on for months, with my mom knowingly approving each missed period one by one. After nearly 5 months of this back and forth, the calls finally stopped about a month before graduation. My mom's persistence had effectively worn them down. Author's note. I'm surprised by some of the reactions to this story. Let me clarify a few things. I could have graduated in my junior year, which means the school wouldn't have received any funding for me being there in my senior year. This was a very well-funded school district, ranked among the top 10 in the state at the time. They had more than enough resources. Out of 9 periods a day, I only had 3 free periods plus lunch. Most importantly, my parents fully approved of the situation, and I was under 18. Legally, that should have been the end of it. It was common sense to look at my record, see that I was excelling academically, and trust my parents. Yet this woman chose to escalate things unnecessarily. I think the whole situation reflects more on her need for control than any real concern about my education.